The Korean-U.S. alliance has been a strong alliance. It has been an alliance that has been forged through the Korean War, through blood. And also we have this great enduring partnership as well too. So I wanted to also talk about that. And I'm sure that today the audience here have either been to Korea or have a little knowledge of Korea as well. So if I may ask, does anybody here know how to speak Korean? As everybody probably know how to speak Korean? Okay, a majority. So maybe then I can do it. 한국말로 할까요, 그냥? So since our time is a little bit limited, and I wanted to leave a little bit of time for maybe perhaps some questions afterwards, I'd like to begin the PowerPoint presentation. And some of the things, I mean, since majority of you have known about Korea, might not be new, but I would like to just introduce about Korea first. And yes. So this is the topic today, Enduring Korea-U.S. Alliance and Partnership. So Korea, when did Korea come on the map of the United States of America? It was in 1882 that actually was official treaty was signed between the Kingdom of Joseon at that time and the United States. Basically, this is the year when the diplomatic ties were first forged, and the treaty was ratified in 1883. The Korean War, yes, and right on to from 1883, and then there was Japanese colonial period from 1910 to 1945, and after our liberation from Japanese colonialism in 1945, 5 years later, the Korean War erupted on June 25th of 1950. The North Korean Communist forces invaded across the 38th peril, and that stretches for about 150 miles across the waist of the Korean Peninsula. And they conducted a surprise, full-scale military attack against the liberally elected democratic South Korea, the Republic of Korea. And they were trying to unify the entire country by force of arms. And about 1,789,000 American men and women served in theater, and about 36,000 were killed that in a war that some people refer to as the Forgotten War. But we, the Koreans, have never forgotten the sacrifice and service of the Korean War veterans. And thanks to their valor and sacrifice, as you know, Koreans were able to rebuild a country that was completely devastated by war into one of the most vibrant democracies and advanced economies in the world today. And during the Korean War, I just wanted to mention the battle that was fought in current-day North Korea. This battle is known as the Chosun Reservoir War. The battle of Chosun Reservoir. But Chosun is the Japanese pronunciation of the term Changjin. And so we like to call it Changjin. And Chosun is, because the United States military had to use the map written out by the Japanese, the name was in Chosun. But this was the battle, one of the most heroic battles American soldiers were fought in the Korean War. On the December 1950, that's when the war erupted. About 13,000 U.S. Marines encountered 120,000 Chinese Communist Army offensive. So this is the time when the Chinese first entered the war, the Korean War, on the North Korean side. But thanks to the incredible fighting spirit of our American soldiers at the reservoir, the evacuation, the Hungnam evacuation operation that saved about 100,000 refugees could succeed. And at that time, among the refugees who boarded the U.S. merchant ship SS Meredith Victory were parents of the current president of the Republic of Korea, Moon Jae-in. And so the captain of the ship was ordered to dump all the weapons and cargo into the sea to make room for the refugees. And so this is considered to be one of the humanitarian success stories of the Korean War. And after the Korean War is not ended yet, we're still technically at war. In 1953, on October the 1st, the Mutual Defense Treaty was signed. In 1953, July 27th, the Armistice Agreement was signed. And that just means that the Korean War is not ended. It's still at a ceasefire status. So this Mutual Defense Agreement commits the United States and the Republic of Korea to provide mutual aid if either side faces an external armed attack, and allows the United States to station military forces in South Korea. And right now, there are about 28,500 U.S. military forces stationed in Korea, and with about 6,000 dependents of the military personnel. And through that mutual defense treaty, Korea and the United States have been keeping a very staunch security cooperation. These are annual joint military exercises, which sort of seems to be what the North Koreans want the joint exercises to terminate. And so Korea has achieved a vibrant democracy. We have a National Assembly, which is a unicameral 300-seat national legislature. The latest legislative elections were held last year on April 13th. And so, as you know well, some of you might have heard of the term Miracle on the Han River. This is the downtown Seoul as it was during the war, the devastation, and this is how it looks like currently right now. And the Miracle on the Han River is a term that alludes to the fast economic development, rapid economic development of the Republic of Korea in a span of just 2 generations of about 60 years. So from a 1953 about $67 GDP per capita, in a course of about 60 years, Korea has reached about $29,200 GDP per capita, a very rapid growth and very unique example throughout the world. And through that prosperity we've achieved, Korea was also able to forge a free trade agreement with the United States. In short, it's called the KORUS FTA, Korea-US FTA. And this is a trade agreement between the United States, free trade agreement between the United States and Korea. The negotiations were announced in 2006, early 2006, and it concluded on April 1st of 2007. So it took a little bit over a year. And the treaty was signed on June 30th of 2007. And now the treaty has been ratified, entered into effect in both countries on March of 2012. So we are in the 5th year. The trade agreement, it involves about an estimated 362 million consumers in the United States and the Republic of Korea. And the treaty's provisions eliminates about 95% of each nation's tariffs on goods within 5 years, and create new protections for multinational financial services and other firms. So for the United States, this treaty was the first free trade agreement with a major Asian economy and the largest trade deal since the NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, went into force in 1993. And through the FTA, after the FTA KORUS FTA agreement went into effect in 2012, more than 45,000 quality jobs were created in the United States, which basically gave incentive for many Korean companies to invest in the United States. And in terms of Utah, state of Utah, Korea is the 10th over here among the countries in terms of the trade volume after the FTA. And some of the things that Utah exports to Korea, these are a lot of the food products like honey, soap, cleaning agents, non-ferrous metals, navigational instruments, pharmaceuticals. These are the exports, Utah's top exports in 2016 to the Republic of Korea. And throughout the prosperity, Korea has also always been an alliance for peace and security. Korea participated also in the Vietnam War with the United States, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And also Korea is an avid participant in the peacekeeping operations around the world. And also Korea started out as a aid recipient country at first, and now it's a donor country operating through its KOICA, which is the Korea International Cooperation Agency programs throughout the world. And humanitarian assistance, wherever there's any disasters, Korea is always committed to helping out. And for global issues like environment and climate change, Korea has been an active participant and also host of multilateral meetings. So throughout this Korean peninsula, I just wanted to show you the contrast between South Korea and North Korea North Korea is a very closed, unreformed society, country, economically quite devastated. And this little light over here is probably Pyongyang. That's the region of Pyongyang. And this starkling contrast forms to North Korea. South Korea is an existential threat to them, with South Korea's prosperity and the continuous widening gap between the two countries. And North Korea's hostile provocations. Here in the United States, we hear about it a lot in CNN these days on the missile launches and provocations. But for us, South Koreans, the North Korea's provocations, we've been under this type of provocation for decades. So almost 70 decades. They first started the Korean War, and Seoul, the capital city, is only 24 miles from, less than 30 miles from the demilitarized zone, which is heavily armed. So for us, North Korea, I don't know if you have already heard of the expression in Korean, 불바다. This expression was used by a North Korean official to say, we are going to turn Seoul into a sea of fire. That was the first time, it was about 20-something years ago that expression was first used by a North Korean official. So we've been under this rhetoric, we've been under this rhetorical attack by North Korea and hostile threats for decades. And conventional weapons, chemical weapons, biological weapons, tons of artillery. Even without the nuclear weapons, North Korea can inflict devastating, catastrophic situation to South Korea through their provocations. So it's not something of a new thing for us in South Korea, because a lot of the people here in San Francisco and the Bay Area are asking, they're concerned about how the situation is going on, what's the situation in the Korean Peninsula, are you okay, are your family okay, relatives okay? But life in South Korea and Seoul, Korea goes on as usual, as normal. So the North Korean missile and nuclear threat, this has been on the news a lot. North Korea is bent on developing diversified missiles. Kim Jong-un test-fired ballistic missiles about 41 times for a total of 61 missile launches over his 5 to 6 year reign. In 2017 alone, North Korea test-fired ballistic missiles about 15 times for a total of 23 ballistic launches. So the North's missile threat is mounting, not only in its frequency, but also in its capability. And so after Kim Jong-un said in his New Year's message in January this year that the North is in the final stage of preparation for the test launch of the ICBM. It test-fired ICBM-class ballistic missile twice in July and once in November. And furthermore, in early August, North Korea even threatened to consider enveloping strike around the U.S. territory of Guam, followed by its 2 launches over Japan a few weeks later. And North Korea obviously poses existential threats not only the Korean people and the region, but also it's a real direct threat to the United States and to the whole world, presenting the most serious challenge to the global regime of non-proliferation. The missile that flew this missile is the missile of Hwasong-12. It's the intermediate range ballistic missile. The missile flew about 3,700 kilometers or 2,300 miles and reached an altitude of about 770 kilometers before landing in the Pacific Ocean. Now Guam is 3,380 kilometers or 2,100 miles from North Korea. But however, a 3-stage rocket would be more powerful than the 2-stage Hwasong-14 ICBM, which was tested twice in July. And South Korean U.S. officials and experts have said that the Hwasong-14 may have a range of about 10,000 kilometers or 6,200 miles and could possibly strike many parts of the United States. So we should be we skipped 12 and then there's a 14. So what happened to Hwasong-13? Well, Hwasong-13, it could be a 12,000 kilometer class ICBM that can also strike the mainland of the United States. So these are the ranges in view. And as you can see, Kim Jong is clenching his fist. This is the latest Hwasong-15 that was launched by North Korea on November 29th. And North Korea said that the new missile soared about 4,500 kilometers in altitude, more than 10 times the height of the International Space Station, and it flew for about 960 kilometers, or 590 miles, during its 53-minute flight. So these are the ranges of the two ICBM, the Hwasong-14 and now Hwasong-15. So North Korea has made credible advances in its missile technology. So how do we respond to North Korea's provocations? Within minutes, the South Korean military conducted the precision strike test missile launch. And so why does the North Korea continue with its nuclear and missile threats in defiance of the unified demands of the international community? Well, North Korea argues that its possession of the nuclear weapons is a self-righteous defensive measure in order to defend its sovereignty against the U.S.'s hostile policy and nuclear threats. It seems that they are convinced that only nuclear weapons can ultimately provide the regime's survival, enabling them to avoid the fate of other dictators like Muammar Gaddafi of Libya and Saddam Hussein of Iraq. And in response to the growing threats from North Korea, the ROK, the Republic of Korea, the ROK government, in close cooperation with the international community, in particular in close consultation and coordination with our ally, the United States, endeavors to resolve the nuclear problem by employing all possible means, including the first sanction, both sanctions and dialogue, fully supported by robust deterrence. This is the position of the Korean government. So first, the ROK government will utilize all possible diplomatic means, including both sanctions and dialogue, so that the North changes its path. And the ROK and the United States are on the same page in this regard. Secondly, given the advancement of North Korea's capabilities, it would be realistic to resolve the North's nuclear problem in a phased approach. That is, first freeze all nuclear and missile programs with the end goal of complete, verifiable, irreversible dismantlement of the North's nuclear program. And so once again, the freezing phase is not a goal on itself, but a step in the process toward the complete denuclearization of North Korea. So we need to stop this vicious cycle of provocations and sanctions. Above all, stop North Korea from further advancing its capabilities with a sense of urgency. Thirdly, we need to pursue a virtuous cycle of denuclearization, a peace regime, and arms control. This means we seek a comprehensive solution, which includes the complete dismantlement of North Korea's nuclear program and the establishment of a peace regime. Fourth, we would like to improve inter-Korean relations, creating a space for diplomacy, which can contribute to changes in North Korea and its denuclearization. So we are sending messages to North Korea that we stand ready to offer a brighter future for North Korea if it chooses the right path. And fifthly, our government will maintain a strong deterrence and defense posture against North Korea's possible provocations based on the robust United States and ROK alliance. And we also need to manage the situation on the Korean Peninsula in a stable manner. And so throughout this process, we certainly need to work closely with the international community, including especially close cooperation with the United States, Japan, China, and Russia, among others. The United Nations, after North Korea conducted its 6th nuclear test on September 3rd, unanimously adopted a Security Council resolution. So most notably, the UN Security Council Resolution 2375. It contains very tough sanctions. It was adopted unanimously on September 11th, only 9 days after North Korea's 6th nuclear test. The entire international community once again expressed its firm commitment never to tolerate North Korea's nuclear and missile ambitions. In particular, this new resolution reduces approximately 30% of the oil provided to North Korea by cutting off over 55% of refined petroleum products going to North Korea. Also, it bans all North Korean textile exports, the North's largest economic sector, which the United Nations Security Council had not previously restricted. In addition, the resolution also prevents North Korean overseas workers from earning wages that finance the North Korean regime, which is a significant source of hard currency for Kim Jong-un. The resolution also bans all joint ventures with North Korea to cut off foreign investments, technology transfer, and other economic cooperation with North Korea. Some countries, including the United States, are implementing also a set of complementary unilateral sanctions against North Korea. For instance, the United States has imposed 5 sets of unilateral sanctions on North Korea since the inauguration of the Trump administration, and President Trump also signed the Executive Order 13810, enabling what is called secondary sanctions against North Korea. And recently, President Trump has also designated North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism. Congress passed a legislation in August requiring the State Department to make a determination on returning, actually, North Korea to the list, which it was placed on after the 1987 bombing of a South Korean airliner that killed about 115 people in the waters off Myanmar. U.S. President, actually, George Bush removed North Korea from the blacklist in late 2008 as an inducement for Pyongyang to follow through on a multilateral nuclear disarmament agreement that actually later collapsed. And as you can see, this is a photograph of the sanctions. This here is the Changmadang. It's a market that North Korea's rationing system completely collapsed during the mid-1990s. And so what can you do if your rationing system has collapsed in a communist state, but to allow these type of bartering type of black market, flea market type of market, and that's called Changmadang, and it is occurring especially on the outskirts of Pyongyang as well. And this here is a photograph of, this is the China side, this is Dandong, and this bridge crosses across the Sinŭiju of North Korea, and this, as you can see, is the main way of China trade that goes through between China and North Korea. 90% of trade of North Korea is with China, and China also provides the oil to North Korea to sustain North Korea. So sanctions take a very long time to have an effective effect. It does not come out immediately. It requires patience and step-by-step approach. Sanctions are implemented according to domestic laws of each state. So how well it is enforced cannot be actually verified, but continuous, consistent sanctions do affect in North Korea. And sanctions and pressures are diplomatic tools, which are aimed at bringing North Korea back to the negotiating table to discuss nuclearization and not to bring down the regime. So North Korea remains an unreformed and closed state, as Kim Jong-un maintains a very despotic regime that resists economic reform. So the government has, as I said, experimented with a few market reforms, but mainly administers a system of very centralized planning and state control of the economy. And as an example, I would like to show you a video clip by Radio Free Asia about the certain type of effects that are of the sanctions that are occurring in North Korea.
This is Rason, near the China and Russia borders. The warm water port is North Korea's most important special economic zone. Foreign companies such as this Chinese-owned cement plant are given tax breaks and legal concessions to encourage them to operate here. But the world's desire to punish Pyongyang for its weapons programs is having an impact.
Many things can't be imported from China anymore because of the UN sanctions. In terms of the transfer of funds from both sides, you could say it's been cut off.
There were more than 5,000 foreign businessmen in this coal smoke-shrouded city, most of them from China, but some have left since sanctions began to bite. The man tasked with drumming up business here admits the restrictions have had an effect, but remains defiant.
우리 원수님의 이제 연구에서
Under the leadership of the Supreme Commander, our economic foundations have been laid solid. Our national power has been strengthened.
이런 조건에서 지금
Therefore, our people won't wither under any sanctions.
더 쭈그러들거나 그런 건 아마 없을 겁니다.
Kim says Rason has received around €500 million in investments, a third of it from North Korea and the rest from abroad. But experts suggest that the squeeze is now on.
스스로
There is a limit in developing the economic zone on North Korea's own, and they need the active investment of foreign capital for it to succeed. The sanctions against North Korea will make it hard for such foreign investments, and North Korea's plans for the development of these economic zones will be hard to carry out for now.
The city wants to use its proximity to Russia and China to ship more foreign goods abroad. But 8 sets of UN sanctions have banned North Korea from exporting items ranging from coal to seafood and textiles, and in light of the latest missile test, that list may be extended.
So throughout this sanctions and pressure that we are implementing against North Korea, China's role is very crucial because, like I mentioned, 90% of North Korea's total trade is with China. And China has repeatedly reaffirmed its commitment to fully implement the UN Security Council resolutions. But nevertheless, there still exists a lingering skepticism about how far China will go to press North Korea. China would not allow the collapse of North Korea. That's one of the main reasons. And at the same time, China is growing increasingly frustrated with North Korea after the North's repeated nuclear and missile tests, putting a strain on the two countries. So there is a growing perception that North Korea is no longer a strategic asset to China, but a liability. And China has recently shown more cooperative attitude with regard to sanctions on North Korea. And more than anything else, China also agreed to adopt the United Nations Security Council 2375 within only 9 days after the North's sixth nuclear test. And given the strong elements of the resolution that I've just explained, such as reducing the oil provided to North Korea for the first time, it is quite noteworthy. For the implementation of the resolution, China's Ministry of Commerce also announced that North Korea-Chinese joint ventures in China would have to shut down within 120 days, a rather quick action. And that 120 days deadline comes in in February of next year. The Republican government will work with China for its constructive role in resolving the North Korean nuclear problem and beyond. And right now, as we speak, President Moon Jae-in is making a state visit to China on a 4-day visit from the 13th until the 16th. And they had a summit meeting where they also agreed on resolving the North Korean nuclear issue in a peaceful manner and a stable manner. So, what do we need to do again? I would like to emphasize the Korea-U.S., ROK-U.S. alliance. Maintaining it robust is the key to withstanding any type of provocations from the North. The Republic of Korea is fully on board on sanctioning and pressuring North Korea and pressing North Korea so that it changes its strategic calculations and comes to the dialogue table. And we believe it is imperative to talk to them and engage them for a peaceful, negotiated solution. And as most of us agree, pressure and sanctions are not a goal in itself, but one of the diplomatic tools to make North Korea change its behavior. And we are on the same sync as the United States. These are the photos of President Trump, who visited Korea in November 7th. He also visited Camp Humphreys, one of the largest and most technically advanced U.S. military bases just opened up in southern part of south of Seoul. And this is him speaking at the National Assembly. And so our intentions are clearly reiterated on numerous occasions, including President Moon's September speech at the United Nations General Assembly. He urged North Korea to make the right decision to choose the path of dialogue. So the ROK government is ready to assist North Korea if it stands on the right side of history. And as our President Moon also mentioned, a nuclear freeze by the North is the entry to a dialogue. And the exit is complete dismantlement, and we will make efforts to minimize the freeze phase. The U.S. also seeks a diplomatic and political resolution of the North Korean nuclear issue in a peaceful manner. In this regard, the United States and the ROK are fully in sync, and Secretary Tillerson of State Secretary Tillerson also stated the U.S. strategy is to pursue peaceful pressure campaign based on what he called the four no's: no regime change, no regime collapse, no accelerated reunification of the peninsula, and not looking for an excuse to come north of the 38th parallel. So, amidst all that, but still, we need to maintain a robust, in order to maintain this situation in a stable manner, deterrence, maintaining a robust deterrence against North Korea is vital. The ROK government is pursuing balanced policy of sanctions and dialogue based on the strong defense. So we're strengthening our military deterrence through close coordination between the ROK and the United States. And we have built this triad system. It consists of kill chain, as you can see from here, the kill chain, the Korea air and missile defense, and Korea massive punishment and retaliation. It's a little bit cut off here, but I'll explain to you. Kill chain is a system to carry out a preemptive strike against Pyongyang's nuclear and missile facilities in case South Korea is faced with an imminent threat. While the KMD, Korea Air and Missile Defense, KAMD for abbreviation, would trace and shoot down North Korea's ballistic missiles heading for South Korea. The KMPR, Korea Massive Punishment and Retaliation, is punishing and retaliating against North Korea if it strikes South Korea, mainly removing North Korea's war machine. And we're making efforts to make these systems more effective and reliable. And as part of these efforts, the Korean government, has also increased the country's defense budget for 2018 by 6.9%. This is the highest increase since 2009. So while the ROK government has reinforced the already robust combined deterrence posture, such as the deployment of the U.S. strategic assets, we are strengthening our own capability, such as acquiring and developing high-tech military assets, including the revision of missile guidelines to allow removing the current limit of 500 kilogram maximum missile warhead weight. So the close coordination discussions are still ongoing between the ROK government and the United States government in this regard. The vision for a peaceful peninsula. So we also want to settle a peace regime on the Korean peninsula. Beyond the North Korea's nuclear issue, my government also seeks to establish permanent peace on the Korean peninsula, along with North Korea's denuclearization, in an effort to resolve the Korean peninsula's conundrum in a more fundamental way. This is President Moon. He presented his vision at the Berlin Initiative, and called the Berlin Initiative in July in Berlin, and this is his speech that he made at the United Nations General Assembly. So in order to reduce the tension on the Korean Peninsula and to prevent any accidental military clashes due to the escalated military tensions and miscalculations, we need to manage the situation on the Korean Peninsula in a very stable manner, and we want to emphasize that. So with this in mind, we proposed inter-Korean military talks in July, basically to resolve the military hotlines and resume the initial contacts. So given the heightened tensions and possible escalation that could spin out of control, some mechanism of crisis management is desirable to avoid any type of miscommunication, misperception, misjudgment, and to prevent unintended conflict and its devastating escalation. So now, as you know well, the Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games will be held in Korea. This is the 43rd Winter Olympic Games, 2018. The name shouldn't be confused with Pyongyang. In diffusing the unnecessary high tension and making a space for diplomacy to work, and restoring the dialogue channel between two Koreas, we believe this Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games can provide a unique and important opportunity. And so we suggested to North Korea to participate in the Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games, and we are awaiting their positive response. We believe this will be a very good opportunity to promote peace and economic cooperation in Northeast Asia, where the remnants of the Cold War and hope for a cooperative future still coexist. So in the midst of this heightened tension today. The two Koreas coming together at this critical juncture would send a message of reconciliation and peace to the world. And South and North Korean athletes marching together at the opening ceremony will send out also a very symbolically powerful message. And we also know that there are some safety concerns. We can assure you that we are confident to make the Pyeongchang the safest Olympic of peace. North Korea's participation is very important in this regard as well. While we have been living under constant threats from the North over the past 7 decades, situations have been managed and under control all along. And paradoxically, you've been to Korea. Korea is one of the safest countries in the world. So we have a very proud track record as well of successfully hosting very numerous number of big international events safely and contributing to peace and friendship among all nations. 1988 Seoul Olympic Games, 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago, during the Cold War, the 2002 FIFA World Cup, and also the G20 Summit in 2010, just to name a few. And so, above all, there should not be a second Korean war. It was a devastating war. And North Korean nuclear problem should be resolved peacefully through political and diplomatic measures, primarily in close coordination between the Republic of Korea and the United States. And we should also envision a brighter future on the Korean Peninsula in a more comprehensive and fundamental way. For this, North Korea should immediately stop its provocative behaviors and respond to our sincere proposals and come back to the dialogue. And we hope that instead of further isolating itself and endangering its own security, North Korea, we hope that they will make a right choice and seize the opportunity before it's too late. I hope also that the international community could foster a favorable environment for this, and I sincerely hope all the distinguished participants of today can lend an invaluable support and cooperation in this process as well. So in Korea, as we say, 같이 갑시다, let's go together. This is a slogan that we say at the military exercises. And so again, my emphasis today is that the ROK US, the Republic of Korea US alliance, should be firm, it should be robust, it should be ironclad, and we should maintain alliance in order to deter any North Korean provocations. I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
We have a few moments for
Yes.
some questions. This is all being recorded so other people can see it. So we'd ask you, if you have a question, to step up to the mic over here. Identify yourself and ask your question. Are there any questions? Please come to the mic. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Kim. Thank you for coming to BYU.
Thank you.
My name is Anya Kapener. I'm a political science major. And as there are several reasons to move forward with diplomatic measures, my question is especially regarding humanitarian aid.
Mm-hmm.
So what diplomatic actions are we and can we do to increase the flow of humanitarian aid and therefore increase the livelihood of North Koreans?
So your question is about what can we do to increase the humanitarian aid into North Korea? Our government has proposed through the United Nations a certain amount, about I think it was 8 million or so, 80 million, to conduct humanitarian aid to North Korea. Now, it has been ongoing, humanitarian aid. Of course, the number has been decreasing from the past regime. But I guess through the international regime, international organization, that's the main way to do it. But the problem with North Korea is that it is such an opaque, closed society that we do not know if those aids are actually being provided to the citizens of North Korea, to the people who are much in need. And we do have the World WFP, with the World Food Program, United Nations humanitarian aid workers stationed in North Korea, and they do monitor it. But still, it's a very opaque society that we do not know how it's conducted, and it's an issue. But doing it through the international community is international regime and international organization very important. But right now, with the situation, North Korea's continued provocation, providing such humanitarian aid to talk about those things is something of a dilemma. I think it's because of the actions that North Korea is taking right now, and I guess the international community is focused on continuing and increasing the sanctions and pressure, mostly because of North Korea's current threats and provocations. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Kim.
Hello.
My name is Kenny Godfrey, graphic design major here at BYU. My question is, what is the ROK's stance on a Korea reunification? Do they think it's possible? And what do they think about it?
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, the reunification of the Korean Peninsula. Our stance is that we do not, current government, we are saying that we do not want the collapse of the North Korean regime. We do not want an absorption of North Korea. We do not want to absorb North Korea and make the unification. It's a phased unification. Of course, the unification, the policy about unification is that we want to do it in a peaceful manner. And that's our stance. And so it's not something, we're saying that let's start with something easy. For example, let's reunite these separated families. Let's start to do that. Let's have a sports interaction. Recently, the South Korean and North Korean male soccer team played. And so we want to start out with those things first and make the groundwork and threshold for the unification of the Korean Peninsula in the future. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
While we're waiting for someone else to get courage to come up, let me ask you a question. Is there a fallback position? Is there an intermediate position between North Korea having its nuclear arsenal and not having its nuclear arsenal? Is there a freeze position that would be acceptable somewhere? The South Korean position is complete dismantling of the North Korean armaments. Their position is, even in their constitution now, that they're going to have nuclear weapons no matter what. Is there an intermediate position where some sort of MAD doctrine, mutual assured destruction doctrine, would assure safety even though they would have some degree of weapons?
Well, that is some type of question that's very, yes, CVID, to complete, that is the position of our government as well as the United States. We're in sync with the international community. I don't think there is an in-between, but what we want to obtain is the complete and verifiable dismantlement of the North Korea's nuclear weapons. And denuclearization is the ultimate goal. And denuclearization is what we are asking. But if we were to compromise with North Korea, then that's going to bring sort of the complete, how do you say, it's the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT Treaty, the international standard, the international trust will be completely dismantled. So we are there's a very fine line. We know that North Korea probably possesses already nuclear weapons, but to recognize it legitimately, that's another issue. To recognize it legitimately would mean that the international society is going back on the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and that's going to bring a lot of, I think, arms race. A lot of countries are starting. It will be chaos. So we do not want to have that. So our position is firm and stands that North Korea should denuclearize, and there's no in between sort of compromise on that. Yeah.
So let me follow up with Professor Peterson's question just a little bit. Yesterday, day before, Rex Tillerson seemed to open the door just a crack by saying that let's sit down and talk. No preconditions. That seems to maybe open the opportunity of a discussion of some type of middle ground, minimum deterrence for North Korea or something like that. Is this a cause of concern? I mean, we don't really know what their intentions are. And later on, he did clarify that no, that's not what it meant. But Is there any concern on your government's part that maybe the United States and President Trump's administration is beginning to soften up a little bit and may walk back a little bit from CVID and say, well, you've got them, welcome to the club, now let's talk about how to control? India crossed over this threshold, Pakistan crossed over the threshold, and we deal with India now all the time. We, in fact, send them nuclear technologies and stuff, even though they violated NPT and took the missiles. So are you concerned that maybe we're beginning to move down that road?
Well, concerned that we're moving down that road, that's not a concern that I really want to think about. It's not, it's a scenario that is sort of nightmarish, I think. We cannot, I think we should maintain a very firm stance, continue to maintain a stable and firm stance. And what Secretary of State Tillerson mentioned in his talk at the Atlantic Council is that, yes, dialogue is important, and we also, our government's position is that dialogue is important in the sense that we need to note exactly what is going on with North Korea, actually. We don't know, even though they have conducted 6 nuclear tests, they're claiming that they're nuclear weapons. They're claiming that it was successful. They're claiming that it's in hydrogen bomb class. Yes, we do have evidence a little bit for that, but we cannot confirm that. So it's good to have the dialogue in order to have a channel of communication to make sure that there are no catastrophic nuclear accident from occurring. And that's the first step. And I guess further on, how we're going to, whether that means that we are backing off from the CVID, I don't think that's the case. We are firmly in sync with that. It's just the mention that his Secretary of State's mention about the dialogue is this one step forward in making that communication line. And from there on, to let's just sit and talk first, and then to communicate and go from there. And I think it's a very initial phase that he wanted to talk about, and not the entire CVID issue. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. My name is Isaac Whitaker, and my question for you is on China and their recent position that you mentioned on moving towards implementing the internationally recognized sanctions against North Korea. So my question is, if China, as they are appearing to do continue to increase sanctions against North Korea, what effects that would have in the area and in the international relations between the countries involved in the upcoming years?
Well, in the China's case, it's very complicated and complex because China, as you know well, entered the war for North Korea during the Korean War, and they are a blood-forged ally. And so, it borders. And China is happy with sort of the status quo, having like a buffer state between the United States military station in South Korea. They don't want to certainly have a unified Korea where the U.S. military comes close up to the Yellow River, onto their border, that is. But they have also been very frustrated with North Korea's continuing provocations, its threats. And so that's why I think China jumped onto the wagon in terms of implementing the sanctions. But still, it's providing the pipeline, and still recently Song Tao, who is the envoy of Xi Jinping, went to China. The mission was to explain to them about the result of the party congress. So China is in a very, I think, tricky situation themselves. They need to. They're frustrated, obviously, with North Korea being intransigent in its position and very impetuous about making nuclear weapons and threats. And so they have to respond to that. But also at the same time, they have this relations with North Korea that has been a historic relation. And so they need to, I think they're trying to balance that out. And how that affects, well, we will have to continuously, China has just started, I think, on its road for implementing the United Nations Security Council. So we'll have to see how it rolls from there, how the China's actions are taken. And especially right now, with the South Korean president, we had an issue with China regarding the U.S. defense missile system called THAAD, an abbreviation for the terminal high altitude air defense system, which was installed in South Korea, and China was very unhappy about that because they said that provokes and that also threatens the China's security, national security. And so they have retaliated economically by cutting off any Chinese tourists going to South Korea and everything. So we're now mending. Our president is in China, the ties with China right now to mend those ties and to have much more closer cooperation with China. And that is the key, I think, to have a close cooperation with China, because China is a very important actor, a key actor in the North Korea's nuclear and missile threat issue. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, I think our time has expired. I want to thank you once again for coming. That was a marvelous presentation, very up-to-date and current, which answered a lot of questions for us, I think. And we want to thank the consulate for remembering BYU. You're always welcome here, and we thank you for your visit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.